Most Honourable Member for Warringah.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. And we are, I should say, in speaking around Paid Parental Leave Amendment, adding superannuation for a more secure retirement bill, we can't really start this debate without acknowledging that we are still a long way from gender equality in Australia. And whilst this bill is a step in the right direction, we still do have a long way to go. Women aren't paid as much, they don't have as much super by the time they retire, and are more likely to end up in poverty than men. Steps in the last few years to address areas of gender inequality and equality have been taken, and I very much welcome them. But we do need more action to narrow the gender pay gap, increasing paid parental leave and closing the super gap between men and women. So today the government is acting to ensure that those on Commonwealth paid parental leave receive super. This is an important progress. Time out of the workforce caring for children on paid parental leave should not come at a detrimental financial cost for more often than not women. It's what we saw the motherhood price, that cost, and I think now ultimately cost of parenthood, where that cliff of earnings for women also often occurs as soon as they start having children. It's deeply frustrating that we still have those systemic inequities in Australia in 2024. Research shows that in the years approaching retirement age, the gender superannuation gap can be anywhere still between 22% and 35%. This is still an enormous gender gap in superannuation wealth, and it has consequences. Modelling from Laneway Analytics shows Australian mothers have missed out on some $3.3 billion in super since the introduction of the government paid parental leave in 2011 because they have not received that super on that leave. And that is all because of taking time out of the workforce to have children. Individuals with low superannuation balances are more likely to rely on their age pension in retirement, and so that's why it matters. It matters that women have sufficient superannuation at retirement age. Around 55% of those collecting the full pension are women. The systemic inequities are holding women back economically. The gender pay gap is still contributing to long-term gender inequality. Financial insecurity in retirement contributes to poverty and housing insecurity of older women in Australia. And a recent report from the Super Members Council found that women today are expected to retire earlier, live longer than men, but currently retire with a third less super. And the same report found that paying super on paid parental leave pay scheme would leave a mother of two around $2,500 better off at retirement, and therefore make a meaningful reduction in the gender super gap, which currently sits at around $50,000. So we know this gender gap in superannuation is a problem, and this bill helps address it, so it's very much welcome. The government paid parental leave scheme is something we should be proud of, with around 180,000 families accessing the scheme each year, many of them all around the country, including in Warringah. Established in 2011, it provided up to 18 weeks of pay at minimum wage to eligible working parents. There have been further tweaks and changes in subsequent years, including the dad and partner pay, providing 2 weeks at the same rate for the father or the partner of a paid parental leave recipient. From July 2020, families have the option of taking the first 12 weeks of paid parental leave in a continuous block, then using the final 6 weeks as flexible paid parental leave, including using it to return to work part-time by using the leave on a part-time basis or sharing the leave with someone else. Last year, the government legislated to increase the number of weeks of paid parental leave, expanding in phases from 20 to 26 weeks by July 2026. While I welcome that, we're still way behind other countries in terms of the scale and scope and length of time of paid parental leave. And we really do need to accelerate this, catching up with other countries. Research by the Grattan Institute shows that shared paid parental leave boosts a mother's earnings and boosts our entire national GDP. What we also need to see is an increase in men or other parents taking that paid parental leave. Too often it is the mothers that are taking it and take the hit to their careers and their earning capacity. So it really needs more work from the government to ensure increasing the shared component or a use it or lose it proportion of the scheme to encourage and incentivise more partners to take up paid parental leave as well. Of course, by increasing the entitlement to 26 weeks shared between parents, Grattan modelling suggests that it would cost the government some $600 million per year, but would add $900 million to GDP, so a $300 million positive outcome, as well as boosting mothers' lifetime earnings by some $30,000. So I would like to see the expansion of time shortened in relation to paid parental leave, but I was pleased to see at least an expansion, a minimal expansion, pass through the parliament this term. Now, as recommended in the final report for the Women's Economic Equality Task Force in 2023, we are legislating the payment of superannuation on paid parental leave, and it will come into effect from 1 July next year. So I do welcome this, but I think there are still a few areas of focus for the government, in particular for coming up with a scheme or some form of acknowledgement of when older women also frequently take time out of the workforce to care for elderly parents. And that is, again, a time at which they lose earning capacity and superannuation. And there has been proposals put forward to start to remedy that. But in relation to this bill, I welcome this bill and the intent of what it does. Now, I should note the Coalition's second reading amendment, whilst it has some elements that I support, I am concerned with yet again an attempt, I think, to undermine the superannuation system. The third part of the amendment, which seeks to encourage early withdrawals for a variety of reasons, but in particular the collection of this paid parental leave component as a block to be used to meet the costs of the child. Whilst I appreciate the cost of having children is great, and I certainly have been there and I know that is really hard, the point of superannuation is to ensure a comfortable retirement. It's to ensure people aren't living in poverty in retirement. And if we allow the amendment as proposed by the opposition for that receipt of the paid parental leave payment as a block and available now, then we are undermining the very purpose of this, which is to ensure women do not have inequality at retirement when it comes to their superannuation. So I simply cannot support that. We've seen this happen before during the COVID pandemic. Whilst maybe well-intentioned to ensure people struggling financially to access finance, we saw the moves in relation to being able to withdraw from superannuation in two payments of $10,000 up to $10,000. Now, the difficulty with that is overwhelmingly it was women, and overwhelmingly women are now finding themselves with significantly less super in for their retirement. The Australian Institute found that between April and December 2020, 1.5 million women drew down their super, and that is 1/4 of the entire female workforce. Some $14.9 billion was stripped from women's already small retirement savings. Some 345,000 women completely emptied their accounts. Now, that is really concerning because that means a huge number of women will be exposed when it comes to retirement age. And what was even more dramatic was it was overwhelmingly younger women. And so what that means is that withdrawing of what little amounts were in super won't have the opportunity to grow through that working period and work life to be substantial at retirement age. And so it's really concerning, all this undermining of the intent of super, and it's really important to preserve that. And so at the moment, this amendment is fundamentally, I believe, undermining what the bill and what this is trying to achieve, which is closing the gap between men and women in super at retirement age. And so I really have to ask the question, is it the opposition's view that women should continue to be disadvantaged in retirement? Should they continue to have less super? Because I don't understand otherwise the intent of this amendment. If it's to better support families to meet the cost of children, then that should be a separate proposal. That should be something that could be put to the budget. You know, is it a baby bonus like used to happen under the Howard years? But it should not be via undermining superannuation. There's still more to do to achieve better economic outcomes for women and better economic outcomes for Australia. These policy suggestions, as outlined by the Women's Economic Equality Task Force, are ones that I've supported and called for. Now, measures such as increasing investment in childhood education and abolishing the activity test, which requires both parents to be working to access childcare subsidies, boosting the availability of high-quality, flexible working and and strengthening the rights of employees to flexible work and family-friendly working arrangements, encouraging employers to set gender equality targets and strengthen reporting obligations to include meaningful benchmarks, introducing a tax offset for people with caring responsibilities who are re-entering the workforce to curb the motherhood penalty facing women, which means they earn less. And I still want to repeat what I've said in the debate in relation to the Superannuation Objective Bill earlier this year. Many of our First Nations people in our communities never get to realise the benefit of superannuation. We have to, when we talk about superannuation, and even in the context of this bill, there is a whole nother level of disadvantage when it comes to First Nations Australia. Many First Nations people just don't get to realise the benefit of superannuation. They remain substantially there's a huge amount of policy work that needs to be done to improve the retirement outcomes and access to super for First Nations Australians. The 2020 Retirement Income Review found that many First Nations people were likely to have either no superannuation or low super balances at retirement, and way more often than non-Indigenous Australians. As of June 2022, $16 billion was was still not being claimed, was sitting in the tax office, lost or unclaimed. And so that's an area of concern. Analysis shows that the issue of lost and unclaimed super disproportionately sits in postcodes with high First Nations populations. So it does beg the question, is this an area that's being overlooked? Do First Nations Australia need some assistance? Do we need to be focusing on why is there so much unclaimed super sitting disproportionately in those postcodes? Worse yet, the full extent of the impact of lost super on First Nations communities isn't quantified. Why? Because super funds don't collect data that's specific to Indigenous people. So whilst I welcome these changes, I think First Nations women are in an even worse situation than non-Indigenous women in Australia. And so whenever we are putting forward legislation that is seeking to address inequalities, we must make sure we have a specific lens and a specific focus on those that are at greater risk and are having so much more inequality on top of the gender inequality. So it's a good step, and I certainly commend the bill to the House and will be supporting it. It's positive, but my call to the government is more can be done in this respect, and I do call on the Minister and the government to have that focused on how we're going to help First Nations Australians access super.
I thank the